Welcome back to Trending in Education. Dan Stratford here to set the scene for this episode. Mike Palmer and Melissa Griffith caught up to talk about Melissa's perspectives on the 2019 Gartner Hype Cycle. If you did not yet listen to our exclusive and comprehensive content around the Gartner Hype Cycle with guest Brandon Jones, go back and listen to that one to set up this one, to hear Melissa's takes and see how she took in the 5 different sectors that Gartner talks about in their emerging technologies. We join the conversation in progress. Apologies for any audio deficiencies in this episode. Everything has been fixed moving forward. Now on to Mike and Melissa.
Tying back to maybe, we've talked to you, we've had conversations with you about the Meeker report, about what Starbucks is doing, about what Amazon has been doing around skill development. Anything jumping out at you as it relates? I mean, you mentioned your interest in data.
I'm going to take augmented humans for 500.
Nice.
Right? So I think that's augmented human in education. It's a place we don't actually think about a lot, but it is, the people are starting to think about, but you want to go to that level a little bit more. Right, like right now, like if you think about, at least I'll speak very personally here. If you think about how I learn right now, it's like I want to learn almost like when I need it. Mm-hmm. Right, like so I don't want to spend years in school or years learning a subject.
Yep.
But if I want to know how to do this latest coding thing, or like how would I handle this financial term or whatever it is I'm doing, I go to the internet. Mm-hmm. And I search for it, and I spend some time reading up on it and figuring out how to do stuff.
Yep.
That's where not even the augmented human with the biochip in my head.
Yep.
Actually having like a place where like artificial intelligence knows like what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, knows what you're learning and can suggest things to you. Yep. That will be like you will. In about 5 months, Melissa, you're going to really want to know the answer to this question.
Right.
And start suggesting your learning pattern. I think that is going to have tremendous value in education. I don't know. You may agree to disagree on that one, but like.
No, can I agree to agree on that one? Okay.
Fun.
It's less fun. I apologize. Well, maybe if you pick something less relevant, I'll disagree with you. But what I think was interesting about, this one is that, interestingly, on previous hype cycles, they've had more wearables. Yep. And more, we did a show a while back on hearables as well. So like how much learning can happen through your ears, also known as your learn holes. So if you're getting a lot of your information through your ears, which I am now, and our listeners are now as well, there's a lot of research emerging into the connection between how you generate speech and how like an AirPod or something you put in your ear could be triggered by some of those thoughts. So like, the human augmentation may come in through the ear and maybe an extension of the sort of wireless, AirPods from Apple as an example. I was surprised that they didn't go into more depth around the wearables, because the other thing that you were talking about, while you were talking, that I started thinking about is also the idea of like a heads-up display. So like the idea that I could have like a layer of support information that could make me enhanced. So like I too was fascinated by the augmented human aspect of the hype cycle this go around. I just would have liked to have seen a little more connection to the human side, like, which I guess maybe they're touching on it a little bit around the sensors. Cause like, I do think it's almost like the intersection between augmented humans and sensing and mobility. Like that's maybe where the wearables land, but I still think we're way behind the curve collectively in really designing technologies that enhance humanity in a way that is like relevant within that context. Like I think frequently it's either managed through a screen or it's independent of humans. And it's sort of like the Internet of Things, but that hasn't really translated into something that makes note-taking better, or makes, heads-up displays of AR layers for captioning, or the ability to sort of trigger a Siri or an Alexa to provide you with some additional data based on what you're thinking. That's the stuff that really excites my imagination around where the future of learning may head. And I really didn't see that in here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. I may be certain more onto augmented human than they are trying to prescribe here.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, augmented human, you could have almost said it the flip way too. Like in education in particular, there's been a lot of talk about personalization, and about like having a computer just feed up what a student should do, and so forth. That technology, it works, and it'll get better over time, and that's the AI portion of this. But like you can almost think about it as what you want to do is augment that technology with human common sense or cognitive ability, because I think that's where this plays a better way. You can make your teachers smarter,
right,
in the classrooms by being able to feed all this information to them, including, like, let's tie back to the wearables, like your student's heart rate is racing right now,
right,
or they're sitting silently in a class,
right,
something's going on, they're not getting something, or so forth. You can make them smarter. Like, you can either have a computer then try and assess that and say, okay, like this Tyler is nervous, he must not be understanding something, or you can have a human intervene at that point with that information that you like, and do so. And so I think it's for people who are on the tech side of it, I think this is actually augmented technology with human intervention. And for people who are on the teaching side of it and the tech, and like humans are the win, this is augmented human. You can make a human smarter. But I think, and you see that putting these two things together is actually where you're going to get the most benefit, right? I think there was that chess game that they played that you can find that when you put the computer with the chess genius, the computer now.
Right.
So, and I think that's where it should go. So chips in my head, sure, but like, I'm waiting for my chip, by the way, in case you have not.
Yeah. Well, you're picking up for Brandon. Brandon had been talking about, signing up. I think Neuralink was, Elon Musk's venture, that it's still out there. And a lot of folks are investing in this technology. And it's interesting. Yeah. I like your thinking too, because like there's both the ability to augment the human as a learner who may be on her own, but there's also the idea of augmenting the teacher who is then delivering more personalized care and direction and instruction that is powered by next-gen sensing, next-gen data. Where do you think that'll emerge, though, too? Because I keep coming back to the William Gibson quote: "The future is here now; it's just not evenly distributed." It does feel like we could enter a world where, the money to lead have access to these, like, augmented capabilities, and then the rest of the world doesn't really have access there. That is always something that, while I get excited by the futuristic aspect of all this, it does, you could envision a lot of this lead to a widening gap where at the forefront of this, where you have the access, you're getting transformative interventions. Which of those can scale, and which of those can scale when powered by humans, is an interesting lens. I don't know if do you have any thoughts on that?
So on your sort of where I think this will happen quickest, I think healthcare, and this maybe because I've been spending a ton of time looking into that space, but healthcare and healthcare education, the fact that in the healthcare industry, you're always having to learn. You're always having to learn the latest technologies, the latest treatments, and coupled with the fact that the more information with the wearables that you could process around the human, right? This is where computer help or AI help is ripe for disruption, to make the doctors smarter quicker. Well, just for more real-time diagnostics, you can see this play interesting place.
Yep.
Just enroll in that place.
Yep. Yeah, I think that makes sense. A medical education, like robo surgeries, a big space. Smart homes for the elderly is another thing. You know, just so that based on sensors, again, getting back to sensing and mobility, based on sensors in the home, you can identify behavioral patterns. When does someone get up? How are they walking? You know, like if there are biosensors on them, like how does that impact their heart rate and other their blood pressure. You mentioned the regulatory side, like just in general, we've talked, and I think we do want to try to dive in a little more on some of the complexities around data privacy. How do you think that's ultimately where I would imagine a lot of the regulatory energy is going to pick up, is like, is there informed consent around all this? Where does that data go? What is the risk of that data being breached? And then particularly around people's health data, their genetic data, like the level to which you can benefit from this AI is almost introducing an equal amount of risk around that data being used inappropriately or in biased ways. Any thoughts on that? Because I think that's something separate from the hype cycle. I think we wanted to come back to that down the road, but I think it's relevant as it relates to this.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have so many thoughts on data. I think every time we talk about the Mika report, we talk about data and we talk about data privacy. So like even the fact that cybersecurity or security of your data has fallen off of their list of trends today, I think that's a big miss on their part. My opinion. Gartner, feel free to call me. I'll read in a little further.
We're gonna have so many calls from Gartner after the show. Yeah.
But the reality of it is like, so, and again, this is my opinion. I had all my social media feeds, everything I had locked up, and I never shared it. I never wanted to share it. And I eventually I told myself this is a pointless exercise, and I just opened it up. I just let everything be completely open. Like I will live my best life. And hopefully it will be an honest life, and I will not get in trouble with it. The reason I'm saying that is because what I've found when I've done that, I share a lot of my, like, I wear a wearable watch. I check my heart rate regularly. I put all that information up onto the internet where it will be completely hackable.
Yeah.
The benefit I get from that is I do get to explore like what technologies can do and inform in my life, and thus far it's been beneficial. I'll talk about like even in the medical practice. I now do not want to go to a doctor that's outside of my network because I've given them all this information and I can see all the information in one place and I can share it in one place, and it's very convenient to me. So I don't want to have to go to Dr. X who's in a different healthcare system now and go, yeah, sure, let's take the same test that I've taken 600 times for you to tell me the exact same thing. I want it all available. So like, because I think given the full picture of data, when data is used correctly, it's going to benefit society more positively than negatively. It says with everything, there are the people that will hack it. They will use it for wrong. They'll probably genetic test me out of the wazoo and figure out that I came from kings and queens. I did.
I mean, obviously. I mean, like they can go through the formality of it, but I mean, anyone who knows you, yeah,
will know it. So, but like, and people will use that. But for me, and I think it's a choice that everyone has to make themselves. I think the good outweighs the bad, and so I am for data, using data to make better decisions, using data to make diagnostic quicker in healthcare, to learn faster, and so forth. And at the same time, I think the way you protect that is you secure it. Right. And you spend a lot of time figuring out how to secure it, not to stifle the collection of it. Which is what I think a lot of the laws are trying to do.
Right. That's interesting. So in some sense, I guess, you're able to make an informed decision about sharing your data, and you're assuming there's like a default that allows you to opt in.
Yeah.
And that's where we'll talk more about this when we get into data privacy, which I think is hugely relevant to learning and just the world and trends emerging today. But there's the idea of that the organizations that are managing that data have the equivalent of a fiduciary responsibility to their customers to be good stewards of that data, just like a bank is a good steward of your, a successful bank is basically guaranteeing that they will be a good steward of your money. The hope would be that we have enough of a regulatory environment to ensure that these emerging platforms allow the user to make an informed decision about sharing their data. And then in addition to that, like ability to opt in, opt out, there's also the idea that once you opt in, the data is protected and is secure.
Yeah. I mean, the challenge I find, and we should absolutely have a broader conversation on data. The challenge I find with regulation right now is the lawmakers are not informed on the information, right?
Yep.
So I don't trust. Let's be clear. I don't trust the Googles, the Apples, the Amazons of the world to be doing the Facebooks, to be doing work with my data.
Yep.
I choose to give it to them because the risk for me, I think, is minimal.
Right.
But I don't trust the lawmakers to make an informed decision. I think they will stifle innovation around this area for too long. And I think that will be sad, especially in the education space where you're dealing with kids and you're dealing with even more privacy laws, which I think are right to have privacy laws around it.
Yep.
Like collecting information on how a student learns, where they learn, what they're learning is going to be beneficial to aid in their learning. And so to just like have blanket laws with no understanding of it, it's dangerous in my mind.
Yeah. Well, and not to mention, this stuff is so cutting edge. It's going to be online in, say, the next like 3 to 10 years. Many of our schools, a lot of the developing world is probably 20, 30, 50 years away from some of the more cutting edge capabilities. I think that's another aspect of this conversation that I also think is fascinating. Like, which of these emerging capabilities could make the most broad impact to everyone, and particularly around education? I think it is interesting, like how much can we assume that everyone will have a smartphone with access to reliable data and some sort of basic technology infrastructure to begin to start capturing this. Because then otherwise, the related challenge around the data is if these emerging technologies are only available to folks who are in the developed world or in the cutting edge, high socioeconomic status space, there's going to be bias built into that data set because you're not going to be expansive enough because it's too hard to open up access and capture the data from folks who may be in less well-served environments. Yeah. So like, any thoughts on that area?
Yeah, so I'll go back to my favorite category that I can't pronounce, so I always have to read it, the post-classical compute and comms area.
Yes.
That's in terms of accessibility to information, accessibility to data, putting the 5G networks in place, putting the low Earth orbit systems in place. Like when you are able to put like the internet over areas of Africa and the rural areas that it has not been able to reach, like the information will start to flow. And when the information starts to flow, that's how we learn, and that's how you can reach more areas. So I think that is going to have outside of everything else, just access to information, which is access to the internet, which is, I guess we're at 50% of the world's population. Was that what the Mika report?
Yep.
Get into that other 50% requires us to have these technologies in place. And so I am most excited about that in terms of accessibility.
Yeah, lots more to cover. One thing I just wanted to put out there as we're getting close to time, at least right now, though we may dig back in on more of this. One phrase I didn't see anywhere in here was the blockchain. Where is the blockchain, Melissa?
and it was in last year's because
It's been all over. Yeah.
I think blockchain might, and again, as I said, I don't think they're covering it. I think blockchain is reaching its enlightenment stage, right? Like it's so used by so many people at this point. And
already,
I think it's the bank. Well, so sorry, let's go back to my little narrative. In my world, I feel blockchain is being used by so many people because it's being used in technology a lot.
Yep.
In how you build platforms and how you share information. It's been the financial service industries have grabbed onto it as a better way to secure their industry.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's going to be there. Like I think blockchain is almost on its way out.
So you think it peaked, troughed, and is now on the way to productivity?
I mean, I without knowing Gartner's algorithm, I couldn't.
First time, I understand. Yeah.
Well, even just knowing their algorithm, how they decide where things are. I don't like. This is my challenge I'm having with their hype cycle, and I will dig into it more. Like when you hit enlightenment, I think you can stay there for 20, 30, 40 years in the enlightenment stage. If I'm understanding the enlightenment stage, which is where I think that's where the technology becomes mainstream.
Yep.
Right. And when that technology becomes mainstream, it should sit there. It's only when the technology is superseded by something else that it goes into its final resting place.
Right.
I think blockchain can be there and it can be there for a long time. Right. But again,
I just think the AI lobby got the blockchain out of this because like the emerging technologies, like, and it's like you put AI in front of everything, you put blockchain in front of anything, it's going to be hypeable. And I just think I'm curious why there was no mention of blockchain in the hype cycle at all. Like there's not like, blockchain for mobility. Like why, like whatever, it's like Mad Libs. You take any of these things that has AI after, like emotion AI, emotion blockchain. Like
I believe Mike has a question for you that we need to answer. I'll do my research. I will do because I am actually fascinated with what is not on the list as much as what is.
Well, because also I do think the other aspect of it as a learner and someone who's, hopefully a lifelong learner looking to upskill, looking to stay relevant, like in a lot of ways, like understanding those things that are starting to hype give you, like, to be in on that early gives you an edge. And that's sort of the whole idea of getting in on the hype cycle, listening to shows like this, trying to understand what's happening. And like, I just still think the adoption of blockchain is in its early stages, and it's still a really great time to learn it and be more creative about the applications of that technology. So I do think there's another, like, it's almost like a hype cycle for emerging skills would be a really interesting idea. Cause like, I think a lot of these, maybe the skill development, the workshops, like how do you train and develop people on the blockchain right now, as an example? Like there's a lot of investment in doing it around artificial intelligence and data. I think there's similar investment on the blockchain side, but maybe it is that it's gone into the trough and it isn't really coming out just yet.
I was looking at it. It was already on the down cycle in 2018. So when it was there, so it's in the trough. If it's where it is there.
But I'm still a fan, blockchain. I'm holding out. I think you're going to come back, and I think we're going to see more of it next year on the 2020 hype cycle, which is going to be that'll be a page turner. Any final perspective on this? How did it feel talking about the Gartner hype cycle for the first time?
I mean, I like it. It's fascinating. It has piqued my interest enough to know that I'll continue to do more research on this.
Yeah,
and see if I can get some folks at Gartner to explain more of the detail behind it.
Yeah, so it's an interesting resource. It's every August it comes out there, just like we try to cover the Meeker report. We cover this. Rohit Bhargava does a non-obvious book every year. If you have ideas on topics like this or reports or analysis that is emerging that you think would be useful for us to talk about on the show, we'd love to hear them. We'd definitely appreciate Melissa's contributions and everyone's contributions to the show, just as we continue to explore what's emerging, what's on the horizon, what's just hitting the peak of inflated expectations. Thanks again for listening. This is Trending in Education. You can follow us on Twitter at Trending in Ed. check us out on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and listen to us in your podcast feed. Thanks again for listening.